In the darkness, some secrets refuse to stay hidden. Some mysteries refuse to be solved. And some stories refuse to be forgotten. Welcome to Blackwater Files. A footballer boards a plane. 4 minutes later, he's gone. No mayday, no wreckage, no body. Just a blip on a radar screen. There, then nothing. For 16 days, the world didn't know what happened to Emiliano Sala. What investigators eventually pieced together wasn't a freak accident. It was a chain of decisions by others that placed a 28-year-old footballer on a plane he should never have boarded. This is that investigation. Decision by decision, failure by failure. Every investigation begins with a victim. To understand what was lost on January 21st, 2019, go back almost 30 years. A small town in Santa Fe, Argentina, Progreso. Emiliano Sala was born premature, so early. Doctors weren't sure his lungs would ever be strong enough to let him run. He spent his childhood proving them wrong, chasing a ball across dirt pitches, replaying grainy footage of his idol, Gabriel Batistuta, over and over, studying how he moved. At 15, a scout pulled him out of Progreso. At 20, he was alone in France, trying to break into Bordeaux, one of the country's biggest clubs. It almost ended his career before it began. He barely played. Loaned out, dropped a level, loaned out again. On paper, it read like a story already finished. Nobody told Sala that. Orléans, Niort, Caen. 3 clubs most fans outside France had never heard of. In every single one, goals. 19 at Orléans, 18 at Niort, a new club record. 5 more at Caen, lining up beside a future World Cup winner. In 2015, Nantes finally bet on him permanently. It paid off fast. Over 3.5 seasons, Sala became one of the most dependable strikers in Ligue 1. 42 league goals, club top scorer, year after year. The first Nantes player in over a decade to score a Ligue 1 hat-trick. By January 2019, only a handful of players in the entire league had outscored him that season. Names like Kylian Mbappé. Off the pitch, he stayed almost invisible. A quiet guy in a small town outside Nantes, walking his rescue dog, playing guitar, reading. Locals didn't call him a star. They called him LME. Then, in January 2019, the Premier League came calling. Cardiff City were fighting relegation. They needed goals. Fast, they offered a club record fee. £15 million, the biggest transfer in the club's history. Sala had a bigger offer on the table. From a club in China, he turned it down. He wanted the Premier League. He wanted to find out how good he really was. On January 19th, the deal was confirmed. He completed his medical in Cardiff. He could have stayed there, started training the next morning. Instead, he made one request. He wanted to go back to Nantes, one last time, not to play, to say goodbye, in person, to every coach, every teammate, every person who'd helped build him into a footballer. Nobody saw any reason to say no. That single human, understandable decision put him back on a plane 2 days later. A plane that had already tried to warn someone something was wrong. Here's where the investigation turns uncomfortable. The aircraft flying Sala between Cardiff and Nantes was a small single-engine Piper Malibu. Arranged informally through contacts in football, never booked through a licensed commercial operator. The pilot, David Ibbotson, was 59 years old. He held a private pilot's license, not a commercial one. He was not legally permitted to fly paying passengers for hire. He was not qualified to fly at night, and he hadn't logged the recent instrument flying practice required to safely handle low cloud and poor visibility. On the outward flight to Nantes, 2 days before the crash, Ibbotson radioed the man who'd arranged everything. He'd heard something, a loud bang, a boom, in his own words. No one grounded the aircraft. No engineer was sent to find the cause. 2 days later, that same plane, with that same unresolved warning still sitting in someone's inbox, was scheduled to fly Sala home. January 21st, 2019. The return flight was scheduled for 9 a.m. It didn't take off until 7 p.m. By then, the weather had turned. Low cloud rolling in over the channel. Visibility falling. Darkness already settling, exactly the conditions David Ibbotson was not equipped and not legally cleared to fly through. He took off anyway. For just over an hour, the small aircraft tracked north toward the Welsh coast, toward home. At 8:12 p.m., Ibbotson made his final radio contact. Calm, routine, nothing alarming in his voice. 4 minutes later, the plane began a series of sharp turns, an apparent attempt to avoid thickening cloud. It was moving too fast for those maneuvers. Investigators would later conclude the pilot lost control. The aircraft broke apart in mid-air. At 8:16 p.m., it vanished from radar near Guernsey. No mayday call was ever made. Somewhere in that cabin, Sala had just sent a casual voice note to friends back home. Tired, relaxed, completely unaware. It would be the last anyone ever heard from him. For hours, no one outside that cockpit knew anything had gone wrong. By morning, it was everywhere. Emiliano Sala, Cardiff's record signing, barely 2 days into his contract, missing over the English Channel. Search teams scrambled immediately. Coast Guard ships, lifeboats, helicopters scanning over 4,000 square kilometers of open water. 80 hours of searching. Then, on January 24th, officials made the call no one wanted to hear. The search was suspended. Survival, they said, was extremely remote. For most people watching, that would have been where the story ended. For Sala's family, it was where a different fight began. Within hours of the official search ending, a fundraiser appeared online. The football world answered immediately. Lionel Messi, Sergio Aguero, Diego Maradona, even Argentina's president publicly pushing for the search to resume. Within days, well over £250,000 had been raised. Enough to charter a private vessel and an underwater search robot for 2 more weeks. Nothing. Just cold water, colder headlines, and a family that refused to stop looking. Then, on February 3rd, near a stretch of seabed, with a name that already sounds like a warning. Herds deep. Sonar picked something up. Wreckage. Inside the wreckage, a body. On February 7th, 16 days after the crash, it was formally confirmed. Emiliano Sala, the pilot, David Ibbotson, was never recovered. His body remains somewhere in the English Channel to this day, but the investigation wasn't finished. A post-mortem uncovered something nobody had expected. Sala's blood showed dangerously high levels of carbon monoxide, almost certainly leaking from a faulty exhaust system, slowly filling the cabin throughout the flight. He would have been deeply unconscious before the aircraft ever broke apart. He didn't drown. He never knew what was happening to him. In his final minutes, he wasn't afraid. He wasn't fighting for his life. He was already gone, quietly, breathing in the very air that was supposed to carry him home. This is where the investigation stops being about a tragic accident and becomes about accountability. The man who arranged the flight, David Henderson, had no license to operate commercial passenger flights. He kept no records of his pilot's qualifications. Months earlier, he had personally banned Ibbotson from flying that exact aircraft after 2 airspace violations. He let him fly it anyway. In 2021, a jury convicted Henderson of endangering the safety of an aircraft. He was sentenced to 18 months in prison. In 2022, a coroner's jury delivered the final word. Emiliano Sala died from severe head and chest injuries after being overcome by toxic fumes aboard an unlicensed flight that should never have left the ground. Every safeguard that should have stopped this chain of events didn't. Somewhere beneath the English Channel, twisted wreckage still rests in the dark. One body was recovered. One never was. A warning sign on a runway that nobody chased down. A pilot legally barred from flying that aircraft, flying it anyway. A 28-year-old striker who said his goodbyes in France and never got to say hello in Wales. He never trained with his new teammates, never wore the shirt, never stepped onto the pitch he'd been dreaming about since he was a boy in Progresso, replaying old footage of his hero, believing, somehow, that this exact moment was waiting for him. It was. For a few days, it was real. This wasn't fate. It wasn't bad luck. It was a chain of small, preventable failures, one decision at a time, that nobody stopped in time. Nante retired his number 9 shirt. His face still looks out from murals in 2 towns, 4,000 miles apart, that both still call him their own. And somewhere out there, in waters that have never given up their second secret, a pilot is still missing.